Mayor Lovett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Kurji. Vaccines that are, for lack of a better word, left over at the end of the day. What happens to those? I'm to understand that any vaccine that is thawed to fridge temperature has a long lifespan, but any vaccine that's drawn into a syringe needs to be used. And I would imagine that there are probably a number of no-shows for booked appointments, or there are a number of syringes that are drawn and then are left over at the end of the day. What's the plan on getting those injections and those vaccines in people's arms so they're not wasted?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank you, Mayor Lovett, for that question as well. So we have experimented with many different ways, and each one has its pros and cons. To begin with, the numbers that we're dealing with are not that high. However, the amount of effort that's needed is very, very high. So the provincial guidelines are, first, you try and immunize people in the priority groups. That is, those that are eligible to receive the vaccines. If you can't find them quick enough, then you could go to the next priority group. So we've kind of been, of course, changing of approach as we change the priority groups. However, at present, the approach that we are trying quite heavily is we get a few individuals who may not necessarily been able to get their vaccines but have appeared, and they are in the priority group. Then we would basically tell them that we might call upon them if we have end of dose vials. Likewise, we may actually then go to groups. Some, for example, are in occupational health groups. For example, when we get to critical infrastructure, such as wastewater management and water management in the municipalities, if they can appear very quickly, because the time limits here are dictated both by the expiry of the vaccine, as well as not having our staff wait there for a couple of hours, which has happened in previous instances. So we're experimenting with different approaches. And but in the grand scheme of things, the numbers that can get those vaccines are very few and far between.
Thank you, Dr. Kurji. And you kind of led me into my next question around priority groups. And yesterday, it was announced in British Columbia that the Surrey School Board will be prioritizing teachers to get their vaccines, and realizing that's British Columbia. But excuse me, I'm wondering, do you have the authority to make teachers a priority group, or do we have to follow the province? There's obviously been lots of media attention around teachers not being a priority group, and seeing this jurisdiction in British Columbia make that announcement yesterday. I'm wondering if you have the ability for York Region teachers to become a priority group.
Again, through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mayor Lovett, for that very interesting question. So we've given a lot of thought to this particular area, and the provincial priorities are fairly clear. First, we have to get to the 60 to 79 age groups. We then have to do the hot zones. We also have to do those with health conditions, and health conditions have been prioritized. Those are all regarded as primary priorities, plus there are congregate settings, homeless shelters, etc. We've already done a lot of the homeless shelters and those sorts of priorities, and we are currently working our way through finding ways of being able to reach the ones that I just mentioned. After we've done these priority groups, we can then address the occupational health groups. And in the occupational health groups, they've been subdivided into a primary area and a secondary area. The teachers fall in that primary area. In fact, they're the first ones in that primary area. So what we have been doing is to start approaching the school boards and start ways whereby we could capitalize on the April break and potentially have clinics in the schools themselves if we can garner enough resources from an immunization front and if we have the vaccines. So if those things can be met, and provided we've made relatively good progress with the first category of people that we are expected by the province to have done so, and provided the province doesn't have objections, then we would actually wish to be taking the opportunity to immunize the school staff, in particular the teachers, and any adults associated with the schools. So that would be the game plan there. There are also manufacturing plants that are included in some of these priorities as workers, and we are negotiating with Magna to see whether it would be possible for them to lend their resources and infrastructure to other manufacturing plants with respect to working through the provincially dictated priorities. So we're looking for innovative ways, and this is all work in progress, and we haven't landed on anything as yet. So I don't really want to get people's hopes up because a lot of all this depend on our ability to negotiate appropriate mechanisms, and whether we have the vaccine supplies, and whether the province allows us to move forward rapidly.
Thank you, Dr. Kurji. And please express my sincere thanks to your team who've been working with